report prepared by my colleague Rita Tinina, she mentioned that there wasn't any clarification on the consequence if you did not meet the intended targets. So that's really important. And perhaps add your voice to a point that has been raised in terms of the downside to President Ruto's micromanaging approach, the style of leadership, that perhaps it might create lack of trust in the appointees, hence create lack of, rather fear and uncertainty in terms of them doing their job. Is that a double-edged sword that you might see becoming an issue down the line?
Well, in my view, if you've got capacity and competence in your docket,
yes,
and you are a subject matter and you are handling your docket very well, you should not be worried that the president knows what is happening at your docket. Because if you have got that capacity and competence, you will have a global understanding of your docket. So the president will not surprise you with a call. But if you spend all your time having a single malt whiskey and Yamachoma, then there's a very high chance that the president knows more that is happening in your docket and is going to place a call, and you'll find yourself in big trouble. Again, it would be very reckless for President Ruto not to know what is happening at every state department. Because bear in mind, President Ruto has got a contract with Kenyans. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, parastatal heads do not have a contract with Kenyans. After 5 years, people will look at President Ruto's scoreboard and ask him, we gave you power, we gave you responsibility, we gave you authority. What have you done? Is there a person Fukoni? So the person who is going to suffer the consequences of non-delivery is the president. But if he delivers, then he'll have his contract renewed. So in my view, what the president told the public servants of rank, that in the unlikely events, I get to know more than you about your docket, then prepare to do a resignation letter. Because in that case, one of you must go home. And it will not be the president. It will be the other person.
Okay, husband.
I mean, it's very simple. Any leader, corporate world, political leadership, or whichever space, you've got to influence the led to the right direction, to do the right thing. You've got to motivate them to do the right thing, and you've got to communicate. And I think where we are, if you're serving in President William Ruto's government, and he knows more than you know, then you've not been influenced enough, and you lack the capacity to serve in that ministry. You've not understood his communication enough, and you've not been motivated enough. Because, I mean, we all know the president. I mean, he's been in the public domain. He's been the deputy president for 10 years. We know that he's always at the cutting edge of things. So if you're appointed as a cabinet secretary, it is upon you to be at the cutting edge, to be ahead of the president in what the president has given you a responsibility to take charge of. And you see, for me, it is a writing on the wall that if you can't stand the heat, then stay out of the kitchen. So if you cannot be at a point where, I mean, wherever we've worked, you know that you don't go to your boss and tell your boss this is the problem. You actually go to your boss and tell the boss that these are the challenges, these are the solutions, but we have like 3 options of the solutions. But this, I think, is the best solution to go with, and you give the rationale for that. Now, if it is the president who understands the challenges in your ministries, understands everything that is happening in your ministry, and you offer no counsel to the president, I think that was just a writing on the wall, that there are people in that cabinet, Parliament was just benevolent enough to give the president what he wanted. 1 year down the lane, they've shown the president they don't have what it takes. And just like Dismas has said, at the end of the day, if you look at what we've experienced in the last 1 year, there are 2 things that we've seen. There is winning the presidency, and there is purpose of the presidency. This regime is still celebrating winning the presidency. They are still big on winning the presidency. We are yet to see the purpose of the presidency. I mean, over the weekend, guys were eating rice and beef, in Mount Kenya region. And there are people who are celebrating that this is a government that promised, and they are delivering. Clearly, if our benchmark is to promise people rice and beef, and we deliver that, There's a problem. Someone ought to be telling this guy that rice and beef is a bare minimum. That is something that you can give people. But if Kenyans are going to evaluate the president or on the scorecard based on this performance contracting that we have, no one is going to care about what they ate at Sagana. People will be looking at very substantive issues. And tell me, when Kibaki became the president, there are tangible things that we saw immediately. Free primary education. We saw our GDP grew exponentially. Revenues grew. I mean, there's no cabinet secretary in Kibaki's government who talked about President Moi. For heaven's sake, if you compare Moi and President Uhuru Kenyatta, today we went to Mount Kenya, the things they were launching were a function of the purpose of the presidency and the purpose that President Uhuru Kenyatta was rooted on. It's the reason why they are launching projects. They didn't launch, they didn't finance, they were not even developed during the reign. It was during President Uhuru Kenyatta's time. 5 years down the lane, if they are not careful, if they are still talking about winning the election, they will not have anything to show Kenyans.
Jesse, I'm aware we don't have all the time, but I just want to mention one more thing. I know you want to move to the next topic. Appraisal. Of course, the president, by the way, has every right to know whatever is happening, and that's not micromanaging in my view. In practice, the head of state will be appraised of, will be informed, will be, people will report to him on every other day or week in accordance with the rules and the way he wants. And then practically from the nature of William Samoei Ruto himself, he's hands-on. So he cannot fail to know what's actually happening wherever. However, I think his major complaint is if he knows and you don't know, at least you ought to know so that when you appraise him, when you go to his office or when you report to him and do all the reports, it should be more or less the same, the things he knows, but you should not look like you don't have a clue that probably the dams are burst and water has spilled. You should appear to have that knowledge. Unfortunately, he says his guys not all of them have that capacity. But we should also blame our people for who they are. I have looked at the UDA manifesto in terms of, for example, bringing the price of food down and essential commodities through agriculture and production. So that is where we can do the appraisal. Is it happening or it's not? They are telling us that Russia has given free fertilizer. I don't know if it is the same fertilizer that is now 2,500 or that is in addition. Are you seeing? So it's so easy to appraise, even the head of state, even before 5 years. 5 years is a question of decision making, but we can appraise our head of state every other year. Like, oh yes, Your Excellency, you said this, but we have gotten this. And it's not exactly what you wanted. And of course, I think we'll get the time to discuss the talks and all that. You will realize that much of what is going on is really more political psychology than actually delivering what you have promised.
Let me quickly buttress these points. You will begin to rate Kenya Kwanza administration at the end of the first financial year, because that's when they've allocated resources. And contrary to what Owila has indicated, a respected elder in any village, when people come to see you, you slaughter chicken for them, you give them bananas. They don't just come to your compound and yawn away. So giving people rice and nyama at Sagana State Lodge, I see nothing wrong. And then talking about President Kibaki, and talking about President Kibaki, President Kibaki and President Moi, they set the gold standard on what a president must do when they go to retirement. People must talk about President Kenyatta because he's accused of many things, including supporting the Mandamano. So if a former head of state is in the middle of supporting Mandamano, you do not expect Kenya Kwanza to be passing red roses to him every day. They must ask him, but Mr. President,
we cannot
why are you supporting Mandamano?
Speculations and allegations.
No, those are statements made by Kenya Kwanza.
So we are not going to regurgitate statements made by Kenya Kwanza that are not verified and are basically based on spurious political speak. There's no evidence anywhere that has been tabled that the former president is supporting Mandamano.
And there's no evidence
in fact,
that he doesn't
the president
support the
himself
Mandamano.
has come out and said that the only problem is that he's a friend of Raila Odinga.
Would you expect him to go to the top of Mount Kenya and say, yes, I support Maandamano, I admit I support Maandamano?
Maybe not. This much just if you give us a time.
Yeah.
It is true that professionally speaking, professional scientists and all analysts like us can start to rate the president practically after the first financial year. But the citizens don't do that. The citizens know you are head of state immediately after you are announced the head of state. So if you are going to start to beg citizens, give me time, they will never give you time. Okay. Either in the first year or third year or fifth year. It's like a crying baby. The baby must eat. So food, water, infrastructure. If it's rainy and there's water all over on the road, you cannot tell citizens that I want 1 year before I can fix this issue. It is true, it will take time, but you cannot focus on that. You cannot not even focus on what happened in the past years, handshake, whatnot. You just focus on how every single service can be delivered from day one when you go into office. But if you start saying, "Oh, I have not found money in the kitty," people are forming cartels to deny me opportunity to work. That could be true. But the citizens will actually judge you as an individual. They will not judge the former president. They will not judge the past. They will judge you.
Okay, interesting. It's been a politically heavy week. And just as we perhaps shift focus to the other talking point, it's also proper to note the, how do I call it?